Imagine you're finally about to get your daughter back. For days you followed every demand, every instruction, every desperate request from the man who kidnapped her. Days later, you see her sitting exactly where he promised she'd be. Relief washes over you as the nightmare finally ends. Your little girl's coming home. But then you take a step closer and realize that'll never happen. I'm your host, Gabby D, and this is the story of Marion Parker. Before Marion Parker became the victim of one of the most infamous kidnapping murders in American history, she was just a little girl who adored her family. Frances Marion Parker, known simply as Marion, was born on October 11th, 1915, in Los Angeles, California. She did have a twin sister named Marjorie. The twins also had an older brother named Perry Jr., named after their father. And although Marion and Marjorie were twins, they weren't identical, making it super easy for friends and family to tell them apart. Their father, Perry Parker, worked as a manager at a local bank, a position he held for more than 20 years. His steady income allowed Marion's mother, Geraldine, to stay home and raise the three children. And if there was one person Marion loved spending time with more than anyone else, it was her father. By all accounts, Marion was a complete daddy's girl. She would often accompany him to work at the bank, happily spending time there just to be near him. Friends and family described Marion as outgoing, friendly, and just this ball of energy. She wasn't the type of child who sat quietly indoors. She was a tomboy through and through. She loved playing with trains, throwing footballs around, spending most of her time outside with friends. But no matter how much fun she was having, family always came first. And that's exactly what makes what happened next so heartbreaking. December 15th, 1927 started like any other school day for Marion Parker and her twin sister Marjorie. The 12-year-old girls attended Mount Vernon Junior High School in Los Angeles, and like always, they arrived for class that morning. Back in the 20s, children had far more independence than they do today, so they'd walk to school, they'd catch buses on their own, even at the very young age of 12. So taking public transportation and running errands alone wasn't considered unusual for young children. Nothing about that morning seemed out of the ordinary. But around noon, everything changed. A well-dressed man walked into the school's main office and approached an employee named Mary Holt. He introduced himself as Mr. Cooper and claimed he worked at the same bank as Marion's father, Perry Parker. According to the man, Mr. Parker had been seriously injured in a car accident and needed his daughter brought to him immediately. Naturally, Mary Holt was concerned. Trying to clarify which children he needed, she asked which daughter. He said, the younger one. But there was just one problem with that. Marion was a twin. Now, realizing his mistake once Mary Holt pointed it out, the man quickly laughed it off and said he meant the smaller twin. Now, looking back, it does seem like an obvious slip-up, but in that moment, it sounded believable enough. In fact, when he noticed Mary became suspicious of him, he even offered to let her call the bank and verify his story, and that confidence really helped sell his lie. At approximately 12:15 p.m., Marion Parker was pulled from class. She gathered her things and walked out of the school with the man calling himself Mr. Cooper. It would be the last time anyone saw her alive. When school ended later that day, Marjorie waited outside for her sister, and she waited and waited, but Marion never appeared. Eventually their bus did, and unsure what else to do, Marjorie climbed aboard and headed home, assuming there must be a simple explanation for where her sister is. At first, her parents weren't overly concerned either. Maybe Marion had stayed after school, maybe she's helping a teacher, maybe there had simply been some sort of misunderstanding. But as the afternoon turned into evening, those explanations became harder and harder to believe. Then, at approximately 4:45 p.m., the Parker family called the school, and what they learned instantly turned concern into panic. School officials explained that Marion had already left earlier that day with a man sent by her father, except Perry Parker had sent no one. Police were contacted immediately, and then things got even worse. While officers were at the Parker home, a Western Union telegram arrived, and it read, quote, Marion secure, use good judgment, interference with my plans, dangerous, end quote. And the message was signed George Fox. But just above that signature was another name, Marion Parker. Imagine receiving that message as a parent, knowing your child's alive, knowing she's scared, knowing she's with this person that kidnapped her, and knowing there's absolutely nothing you can do to reach her. The one small comfort was that the signature did appear to be in Marion's actual handwriting, so it was proof that she was still alive, but it was also proof that someone was holding her against her will. And sadly, this would only be the beginning. The following day, December 16th, another message arrived. This time it was a ransom note that read, quote, PM Parker, use good judgment. You are the loser. Do this, secure $75 $20 gold certificates, U.S. currency of $1,500. Keep them on your person, go about your daily business as usual, leave out police and detectives, make no public notice, make no search. Fulfilling these terms with the transfer of the currency will secure the return of the girl. Failure to comply with these requests means no one will ever see this girl again, except the angels in heaven. The affair must end one way or another within 3 days, 72 hours. You will receive further notice, but the term remains the same. The letter was signed by Fate, and at the very bottom it says, if you want aid against me, ask God, not men. The ransom note itself was bizarre. Obviously, ransom notes are meant to be threatening, but this one felt almost theatrical. Some words were written in all capital letters, others appeared in cursive, certain words had been traced over multiple times, making them darker and bolder than the rest, and whether it was intentional or not, the entire thing felt designed to confuse anyone trying to identify the writer. And from this point forward, the kidnapper begins signing his messages with names like Fate, Death, and The Fox. It didn't take long for more letters and telegrams to arrive. Each one increased the pressure on the Parker family. Then came perhaps the most heartbreaking message of all. Included in one of the letters was a postscript written in Marion's own handwriting, and it read, quote, Daddy, please do what this man tells you, or he'll kill me if you don't. Your loving daughter, Marion Parker, end quote. Just imagine reading that as a parent, knowing your child's alive, she's terrified, knowing every decision you make could determine whether she lives or dies. Eventually, the kidnapper would call Perry Parker and the family directly. He provided instructions for the ransom exchange and told Perry exactly where to go, bring the money, come alone, wait for further instructions. Before leaving, Perry carefully recorded the serial numbers on the ransom bills, hoping that if the kidnapper ever spent the money, police might be able to track him down. Then he grabbed the cash and headed out the door. At this point, Perry wasn't thinking about catching the kidnapper, he was thinking about Marion. Unfortunately, someone else had different priorities. Without Perry's knowledge, police officers followed him to the meeting location. Perry never noticed, but the kidnapper did. The next day, furious telegrams began arriving. One accused Perry of being foolish enough to involve the police. Another warned that the press now knew about the kidnapping and that Marion's life was hanging by a thread. One message read, quote, PM Parker, please recover your senses. I want your money rather than to kill your child. But so far you've given me no other alternative. Then another. Quote, Fox is my name. Very sly, you know. Set no traps. I'll watch for them. Remember that life hangs by a thread. I have a Gillette ready and I'm able to handle this situation. End quote. The message was clear. Obey me or Marion dies. Then on the evening of December 17th, the kidnapper offered Perry a second chance. This time the meeting would take place near West 5th Street and South Manhattan Place. Police agreed to stay away this time. Perry would arrive alone. He waited. 7:35 turned into 7:40, then 7:50. Every passing minute must have felt like an hour to him. Then, just after 8 p.m., a Chrysler coupe pulled up beside his vehicle. The driver wore a bandana over his face, hiding his identity, and he had a gun pointed directly at Perry Parker. But Perry wasn't even focused on the gun. His eyes immediately went to the passenger seat where Marion was sitting. She was slumped against the door, and Perry right away called out for his daughter, but no response. The kidnapper calmly assured him she was only sleeping, and Perry wanted to believe him. In fact, he later said he assumed the kidnapper had used chloroform to knock her unconscious. After all, the alternative was unthinkable. Perry handed over the money, no negotiations, no arguments, no heroics. Just a father doing whatever he had to get his daughter back. The kidnapper took the cash and sped away. Perry sat there watching the car disappear into the darkness. Then, roughly a quarter-mile down the road, the passenger door suddenly swung open, and Marion was pushed from the moving vehicle. Perry ran. He ran and ran for his daughter. This was the moment he had been waiting for. For days he had followed every demand, every threat, every instruction, all for this moment. He dropped to his knees beside his daughter and pulled her into his arms. At first, there was relief. His little girl was finally back. Then he noticed something was wrong. She was cold, far too cold. Her eyes were wide open. And as he looked closer, the horrifying truth began to sink in. Marion Parker was already dead. The child he had spent days trying to save was gone. And by 9 p.m. an autopsy was underway. Investigators determined Marion had been dead for approximately 12 hours, meaning she had likely still been alive during the first failed ransom exchange. And that's the kind of detail that would haunt a parent for the rest of their life. What if things had gone differently? What if the police didn't show up that day? Unfortunately, the autopsy would reveal an even darker reality. Marion's arms and legs had been removed, her body mutilated, her abdomen had been stuffed with a towel and a man's shirt. And perhaps the most disturbing, we find out piano wire had been used to hold her eyes open in an attempt to make her appear more alive. So Marion was dismembered, disemboweled, and her eyes shown open. And this is exactly how her father found her in his arms that day. The following morning, December 18th, the horror continued. A man out for a walk noticed several newspaper-wrapped packages just lying on the side of the street. Curious, he approached and opened one, and he instantly wished he hadn't. Inside were human remains. He said he knew right away that they belonged to a child just because of how small they were. Investigators would confirm the limbs and organs found in the newspaper wrappings belonged to Marion Parker. News of the murder spread rapidly across the country. It's the 20s, stuff like this doesn't happen. Newspapers couldn't print updates fast enough, parents were terrified, schools were on edge, and people wanted answers. A reward of $55,000 was offered for information leading to the killer's arrest. Eventually, that reward would climb up to $100,000, and in today's money, that's nearly $2 million, so it went from $1 million to $2 million. Police now faced enormous pressure. A child was kidnapped, a child had been murdered in a very brutal way, and somewhere out there, the man responsible was still free. With pressure mounting from the public, police began chasing every lead they could find. Early on, investigators detained two men, Earl Smith and Lewis Wyatts, but neither man had been the kidnapper. Mary Holt, the school employee who had released Marion to the fake Mr. Cooper, was shown the suspects and immediately said neither of the men had been the one she saw that day. And honestly, I can't imagine the guilt Mary Holt carried, not only that day, but for the rest of her entire life. She had not only been deceived, but she had also been the last person to see Marion alive besides the murderer himself. And as the investigation continued, the search exploded into a nationwide manhunt. More than 20,000 officers and thousands of volunteers were looking for the person responsible. Then investigators got their first real break. When Marion was disemboweled and all her organs were taken out, there was a shirt found inside of her. I'm not sure if you remember me stating that earlier, but detectives discovered a laundry mark on this shirt. And a laundry mark just tells them where it came from. That seemingly insignificant detail would lead them to a Los Angeles apartment building called the Bellevue Apartments. And police began searching unit after unit. They were being as thorough as possible. And eventually they came across a dark-haired man named Donald Evans. When officers explained why they were conducting a search related to the Marion Parker case, Evans appeared calm. He invited them inside, they searched the apartment, found absolutely nothing, and before they left, Donald Evans reportedly told them, quote, "I hope you catch the fiend." The officers left finding nothing, completely unaware they had just spoken to the man they were hunting. 2 days later, on December 20th, investigators located the Chrysler coupe used during the ransom exchange. This time they found something useful, fingerprints. And those fingerprints belonged to William Edward Hickman, a 19-year-old in the area. And suddenly, everything started to make sense. William Hickman wasn't just some random stranger. He had once worked at the very same bank as Marion's father, Perry. In fact, a year earlier, Hickman had been arrested for stealing money and forging checks from the bank while he was employed there. And the person who reported him was his manager, Perry Parker, Marion's father. Hickman had stolen approximately $400 at the time, which would be nearly $8,000 today. But despite his thieving, he received probation. Having Hickman's prints, the investigators decided let's compare his fingerprints to the prints recovered from the telegrams that arrived at the Parker's residence, and this turned out to be a perfect match. At that point, police had all the probable cause they needed. They returned to the Bellevue Apartments, and this is when a chilling realization hit them. William Hickman and Donald Evans were the same person. The man who had calmly wished them luck in catching the killer was the killer. This time, investigators searched much more thoroughly, and the evidence began to pile up. They found bloody footprints, partially burned drafts of ransom letters, newspaper clippings about the kidnapping, Then the building's janitor came forward, and he reported seeing Hickman carrying several large boxes to his vehicle on December 16th. He also recalled watching Hickman carefully wipe down and clean out the interior of his vehicle that day. By now, there was little doubt who they were dealing with. The question wasn't whether William Hickman had done it. The question was what kind of person could do something like this in the first place. So now let's talk about William Trash Hickman. And no, before anyone asks, Trash wasn't actually his middle name, it just feels appropriate. William Edward Hickman was born in 1908 in Sebastian, Arkansas, to William and Eva Hickman. He later grew up in Kansas City, where by most accounts he appeared to be a fairly normal kid. Teachers described him as intelligent, he performed well in school, participated in clubs, including the school's debate team. Nothing about his early life screamed future child murderer. But while the police were learning who Hickman was, police had a much bigger problem. They couldn't find him. Investigators searched LA, they checked Kansas where he'd grown up, they even looked into El Paso, Texas, which is where his father was living at the time, but nothing. Hickman had vanished into thin air, so police did the only thing they could. They flooded newspapers across America with his photograph. If someone saw William Hickman, authorities wanted to know immediately. And per usual, tips just started pouring in. One gas station attendant in Oregon reported seeing a man matching Hickman's description driving a green Hudson sedan. Then investigators got an even bigger break. One of the ransom certificates was used to purchase cold weather clothing in Seattle, Washington, and suddenly police throughout Washington and Oregon were on high alert. Then, on December 22nd, 1927, everything came crashing down for Hickman. In Echo, Oregon, Chief Tom Goodwin and Officer Buck Llewellyn were taking a break when they spotted a green Hudson sedan driving past them. The description matched, and they immediately gave chase. A short time later, they were able to force the vehicle to pull over, and behind the wheel sat William Hickman. And surprisingly, he didn't resist one bit. He didn't run, he didn't fight. Instead, he simply shrugged his shoulders and reportedly said, quote, "Well, I guess it's all over." After days of fear and uncertainty, the man responsible for Marion Parker's kidnapping had finally been caught. When Perry Parker learned of the arrest, he said, quote, "I feel a sincere thankfulness that this man had been captured and that mothers no longer need to feel that he may carry off with their children." But despite his arrest, Hickman wasn't done talking. In fact, once he was in custody, he began making claims that would set investigators down an entirely new path, because William Hickman admitted he was involved. But he insisted he hadn't acted alone. Once in custody, Hickman immediately began trying to spread the blame around. According to him, there was other accomplices. He claimed two brothers, Oliver and Frank Kramer, had helped plan the kidnapping. Hickman, of course, was trying to paint this less monstrous picture of himself. He told investigators he had taken Marion to the Rialto Theater to watch a movie and claimed his only role in the crime was writing the ransom letters and making phone calls. According to Hickman, he had absolutely nothing to do with Marion's murder. No involvement whatsoever in her death. There was just one small problem with that story. The Kramer brothers had been sitting in prison for months at this point, so unless they had somehow mastered the ability to commit crimes from behind bars, Hickman was lying. Before we jump back into the action, I have to shout out the first ever sponsor of our show, Dubby. If you follow me on social media, you already know I'm usually deep grinding Apex or running missions in Warframe, and when you're locking in for hours, the last thing you want is that mid-game crash. That's why I've been loving Dubby. They're known for their jitterless energy blends, which means no crash, no weird shaky feeling, and no guilt. Just clean focus that helps you lock in and carry your squad for hours. And if you're an anime fan like me, you have to check out the Crunchyroll collab. The anime-themed shakers are insane. I've got the Chainsaw Man energy blend and the Free Run shaker on the way, and I cannot wait to show you guys. If you want to level up your setup and support the show at the same time, head to dubby.gg, that's dubby.gg, and use code BONESAW at checkout, BONESAW, for 10% off your entire order. All the info is in the show notes. Huge thanks to Dubby for believing in the pod, and a huge shout out to you guys for listening. Now, let's get back to it. Detectives quickly confirmed the brothers couldn't have been involved, and Hickman's story immediately began to fall apart. Meanwhile, LAPD detective Herman Klein was assigned to escort Hickman back to California by train, and during the trip, Hickman reportedly asked, "What do the people of California want with me?" Which is honestly one of the dumbest questions I've ever heard a murderer ask, but I digress. Detective Klein answered bluntly, quote, "Honestly, they want your life. Rightfully or wrongfully, that's what they want." Somewhere during that train ride, Hickman decided to write a 19-page confession, and in it he claimed the motive was always money. According to Hickman, he wanted to attend college but didn't have the funds, which is an absolutely pathetic excuse. Lots of people want to go to college. Most of them don't kidnap and murder a 12-year-old child to do so. Hickman also claimed he only killed her because she recognized him. Personally, I don't buy that explanation either. At this point, Hickman knew the case was making headlines, and I don't buy this explanation either. Judging by the increasingly angry and threatening messages he sent the Parker family, it seems more likely he was spiraling and taking that frustration out on Marion. It also seems like she was murdered after the first attempt to get her back when he realized the police showed up, so I think he just got angry and took it out on Marion. Now, in that 19-page confession letter that Hickman wrote, he admitted he strangled Marion before dismembering her body. He later altered her remains in an attempt to convince Perry Parker that his daughter was still alive during the ransom exchange, which is why he shoved the sheet and shirt inside of her stomach. It's all a level of cruelty that's difficult to put into words. First, he stole the Parker family's daughter, then he stole their hope. And just when Perry believed he was getting Marion back, Hickman ripped that away too. On January 25th, 1928, William Hickman's trial began. And like so many defendants before and after him, he entered a plea of not guilty by reason of insanity. This was actually a new defense in California at the time, so I'm sure they all weren't rolling their eyes like we are, but I'm sure a few were. Once in prison, Hickman began putting on a performance. He'd talk to himself, claim he was communicating with another personality, like he's Dexter dealing with his dark passenger, but Hickman said his was named Providence. Meanwhile, investigators were still digging through his claims and his confession. Hickman had not only confessed to Marion's murder, but also claimed involvement in the killing of a pharmacist named Charles Toms, alongside an accomplice named Welby Hunt. Now, just a little side note, I was actually going to cover this case as a bonus episode for Patreon and Apple subscribers, but it's the 20s, it wasn't a huge headline case, so there's not much about it. It seems like the two boys went in, they were very young, they were teenagers at the time. Hickman wanted to rob the pharmacist, get money, of course, money's always the motive with Hickman. Went in there and ended up shooting and killing this man in front of his wife. And I could be incorrect, don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure it was on Christmas Eve. And he actually killed Marion in early December, before Christmas as well. I'm not sure if this month has any correlation with Hickman or some tragic event in his life, but it does make it worse knowing these murders were so close to the holidays. Again, this case dominated headlines across America. Crowds packed the courthouse every day. Even famous author Edgar Rice Burroughs attended portions of the trial. Everyone wanted to see this man who had kidnapped and murdered Marion Parker. Hickman's attorney, Jerome K. Walsh, built the defense entirely around insanity because what other excuse do they have? Prosecutor Asa Keys wasn't having it. He brought in psychiatrists to examine Hickman extensively, and their conclusion was Hickman knew exactly what he was doing. He understood right from wrong, and he was fully aware of his actions when he kidnapped and murdered Marion Parker. Hickman would claim this alter ego of his, Providence, had encouraged him to kill. That's the story he stuck to through and through. Suspicion only grew stronger when another inmate informed investigators that Hickman had asked for advice on how to act insane in court. According to the inmate, Hickman planned to put on a show. He said he was going to go in there yelling, screaming, just acting erratic, anything that might convince a jury he was not responsible. Prosecutors also rejected Hickman's explanation that he committed the crime to pay for college, and honestly, so do I, it's bullshit. They believe the motive was far more personal. Remember, Perry Parker was the bank manager who reported Hickman for theft and forgery, so Marion's dad, and Perry Parker would actually testify against Hickman during that trial, so I'm sure Hickman had a huge vendetta against him. The very theft case that put Hickman on probation was the reason he wanted revenge. They also believed he created attention and notoriety by what he was saying in prison, a theory supported by his own statements of wanting to become a famous criminal. In February 1928, the jury retired to deliberate. Hickman was found guilty after only 36 minutes of first-degree murder. Hickman would acknowledge his fate, saying, quote, "The die is cast," end quote. On Valentine's Day, 1928, the judge sentenced William Hickman to death, and in response, Hickman just laughed in the courtroom. In the days leading up to his execution, he made a series of statements that somehow managed to make him look even worse. He admitted that he wasn't insane, which, surprise, we knew that. According to Hickman, he strangled Marion after she demanded to be released. He later admitted, once he strangled her and then placed her in the bathtub and started to dismember her body, that she was probably still alive. He also told interviewers that he got a, quote, kick out of it, which tells you everything you need to know about William Hickman. Later, he would state, quote, "I wasn't crazy when I killed the Parker girl." Those were William Hickman's words himself. So that goes against his whole defense. I mean, we know the man's guilty. We're just waiting for the day he kicks rocks at this point. Now, William Hickman would blame the reason he went after Perry Parker was due to a Bible verse, specifically Romans 16:25-27, in case you're interested and want to look it up. On October 19th, 1928, just 8 days after what would have been Marion Parker's 13th birthday, William Hickman was executed by hanging at only 20 years old. Witnesses reported that as Hickman stepped onto the gallows, his nerves appeared to get the best of him. As the execution began, he actually stumbled. And because of that fall, there was debate afterward about exactly how he died. Did the drop break his neck instantly, or did he slowly strangle to death since he slipped out from under his feet before he could even drop fully? Honestly, after everything he put Marion and her family through, I don't think many people cared either way. And with that, this case comes to an end. But for the Parker family, there was never really any closure. A 12-year-old girl who loved football, trains, and spending time with her family was gone forever. And all because William Hickman decided that his desire for money mattered more than their daughter's life. Now, before we go, remember how Hickman claimed he had an accomplice in the murder of a pharmacist? I just wanted to confirm, unlike the story he told about the Kramer brothers assisting him in Marion's death, this was true. His accomplice was very real, and he was actually convicted and sentenced to life in prison for aiding in the murder of said pharmacist. But that's it for today's case. What do you guys think? Make sure to tell me in the comments, and if you haven't already, please consider leaving us a 5-star review. It helps the show grow and reach more listeners. You can find ad-free bonus episodes on Apple Podcasts, and even more bonus episodes and content on Patreon. I'm Gabby D, and I'll see you guys next week beyond the Bonesaw. Until then, always remember the names behind the headlines. Before we get back into the case, I want to take a moment to shout out the first ever sponsor of the show, Dubby. If you listen to us, you probably know most of my research happens late at night. We're talking deep dives at midnight, open tabs everywhere, timelines, court documents, police reports, the kind of rabbit hole where suddenly I blink and it's 3 a.m. That's where Dubby comes in. Their jitterless energy blends mean no crash, no shaky hands, and no foggy brain. Just clean focus that actually lasts. It helps me stay locked in while researching cases or recording long sessions without burning out halfway through. And honestly, I love that I don't feel gross afterwards. No guilt, no wired feeling, just steady energy when I need it most. If you want to support the show and stay sharp during your own late night deep dives, head over to dubby.gg. That's dubby.gg and use code BONESAW at checkout. That's BONESAW for 10% off your entire order. Huge thanks to Dubby for supporting the pod, and a huge thanks to you guys for listening. Now, let's get back to it.